Okay.
Okay, do you want to?
All right, we'll begin then. Hello and welcome to Introducing Self-Study Research Seminar. We are so delighted that you are interested in self-study research and here to join us. I'm Anastasia Samaras, and we're going to wait a few minutes while people are logging in and finding the SSTEP password. And while we do that, we ask you to feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box and also to post the inquiry that we prompted you to consider. So have fun. You might find somebody else doing similar research and inquiry like you, and then you can connect with them privately in the chat. So have fun introducing yourselves, everyone, and thank you. Wow, look at this, huh? All over.
Wow, New Zealand, still awake.
Oh. And what time is it in South Africa, right?
The same time as in the Netherlands, so it's the afternoon.
Okay, so that
yeah,
would,
that's not
oh, my goddaughter joined. Hi, Andrea. Isn't that fun? So fun. Thank you, Laura, for all this. Oh, we've got some George Mason people coming on. Okay.
Yeah. Nepal.
Wow. Oh, hi, Marjorie. Some of my colleagues. Oh, Deb too. Well, hi, Deb. We just want to give virtual hugs to all of our colleagues, don't we? Yeah.
It's such a fun to see everyone. I'm
a former grad student.
Myself.
Isn't that great? Such a joy. Well, we're so grateful to all the people who have mentored participants, including me. I'm glad that somebody mentored me. Should we begin then, Laura?
I think we can. We're at 70 participants right now.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, hello and welcome again. Thank you for introducing yourself, and please continue to do that as we're moving through the webinar together. First, Mike and I want to thank the Self-Study of Teaching Education Practices, SIG, for sponsoring this webinar. Many thanks to Eliza Pinegar for her amazing expertise in social media, and to Laura Kennedy, who superbly coordinated your registration and your participation and questions, and is serving as the moderator of this webinar. We'll introduce ourselves and then we'll get started with the webinar. A little bit about me. I'm Anastasia Samaras. I'm a professor of education in the College of Education and Human Development at George Mason University in Virginia. And my signature work in self-study has included personal history self-study, making self-study accessible to pre-service and in-service teachers, and during the last decade, self-study for faculty development. I've also had the wonderful opportunity to work with our current chair of our SIG, Kathleen Pithouse Morgan, and we have been studying our facilitation of enacting transdisciplinary polyvocal faculty self-study learning communities in our home institutions. And I've also had the wonderful opportunity to work with Mieke Lundenberg from the Netherlands. And we have written together and also conducted workshops together. So Mieke?
Thank you, Anastasia. Welcome from Amsterdam too. My name is Mieke Lunenberg. I'm retired from VU University in Amsterdam, but I've worked on self-study research in, I think, the past 15 years, introducing self-study research in the Netherlands, and do quite some international work on self-study research. I've worked especially with teacher educators who wanted to learn more about self-study. Well, I think those are the most important things about me. So over to Laura, I think.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Laura Kennedy. I am, of the three of us, the newest to self-study. I just graduated from Michigan State University's teacher education program, so finished my dissertation and defended a couple weeks ago. My dissertation research was around novice teacher identity, and the last chapter of the dissertation was a collaborative self-study or collective self-study with the teachers from the dissertation. Our running inside joke as a group was that last chapter was their chance to rebut my dissertation and tell their own story. And hopefully it'll be published in the near future. So welcome to everyone, and we have a few housekeeping things to go over before we get started. First, we are recording the webinar and we will be posting it to our SIGS website later this week. So if you find yourself wanting to re-listen to parts of the webinar, feel free to go to the SIGS website and revisit the conversation we're going to have today. Also, we have been building a resource database for you in a Dropbox. At the bottom of the screen, you will see a tiny URL. That tiny URL will take you to a Dropbox full of methods papers, exemplar papers that you can read through. Also, the slides from the presentation are there. This tiny URL will be on every slide throughout the presentation, so you don't need to rush to copy down the link now. It'll be there for the entire hour. And last, we will do our best to keep this to 1 hour. It might run over by a few minutes, but feel free to use that chat window to post questions as we're going. Anastasia and Mieke will be monitoring those questions and responding to them throughout the webinar. So if you have questions, share them to all panelists, because we suspect a lot of you will have similar questions. Okay, Mieke, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about what we are planning to do the next hour. First, we will tell something about self-study research in general, about the process of self-study research. And then we will move to 4 stages of self-study. How do you formulate your research question? How do you find your research question? How do you frame your question, your study within the literature? That's the second thing we would like to talk about. We had already quite a lot of questions about collecting data and analyzing data, so we will talk about that too. And finally, the last stage will be talking about presenting and publishing your study. And then we hope to have some time at the end to answer some more questions and to wrap up this session. Anastasia, over to you.
Thank you, Mieke. Well, let's begin with where did self-study research start? In the early 1990s, a group of teacher educators began to wonder, if they were asking their students to conduct studies, why weren't they studying their own teaching? And the SIG, then part of AERA now, was born. Then later, and more recently, self-study scholars have come to recognize that self-study research is actually applicable to other professions as well, to other practitioners. And so it's extended out not only in various disciplines, but to other practitioners. It's not bound by a discipline or bound by a particular theory. Its roots are it is a form of practitioner inquiry, and within that was very influenced by the field of teacher inquiry, of action research, and of reflective practice. And we'll go over how it's different because I saw a lot of you had questions related to that. And you had also asked about what is it like, how do universities view self-study? And I will say, since its conception, I have actually been absolutely amazed at the way that it has grown so exponentially, that now, as an established paradigm of qualitative research, it has produced 2 international handbooks by Springer. It has its own journal, the flagship journal, the Studying and Teaching Education. There's been biennial conferences in England since the early 1990s, and book series with well-established publishers and journals. So it's very vibrant. So a little bit from the beginnings now to, well, what is it? And Mika and I have posted trying to post a concise definition for you, or phrase of systematically studying your professional beliefs and actions with the support of colleagues to improve practice and contribute to the knowledge base. We also want to break that down a little bit for you. And you will find on the Dropbox, as Laura said, on the link below, that Amika and I have written an article about teaching self-study, and that includes some of these design elements, and you're free to look at that later. I've also posted 2 chapters from my Samara Sage handbook. One of them is a chapter on these methodological components, and the other one is on assessing research quality, which many of you also had questions about. So these components were gleaned over decades of research by many self-study scholars and refined over time. Lebowski has articulated them in a beautiful chapter in the handbook. And these methodological components, I ask you to just consider when you're listening to some of this is, what makes that different? Perhaps what makes self-study research and distinguishes it most from other paradigms is that the question you're asking is about yourself. You are inside the research. And not only that, but you're inside of it to ask about professional practice in order to improve it for beyond yourself. And it is situated within that practice. So when you describe your research, you're really detailing the context so that other people can see where your inquiry is situated and how that might be an exemplar for them to then understand and call upon to as an exemplar for their research. So methodological component, personal, situated, life history. Notice that, and you'll also find lots of resources in the Dropbox, that the questions that the self-study scholar asks really distinguish it from other research methods. So this is a methodology that has many methods. The questions that they're asking always include the I. What is my role? How might I be involved in? So we're not studying the other as much. We are the research instrument, and we are situating ourselves front center in that study. And we are asking not just, how can I change my classroom? How can I change these students? How can I get them to do something? But really asking a deeper question beyond the technical of, what's my role in this? What could I do differently? Or what am I doing so well that's making this work? So those are, we really encourage you to read widely. There's so many resources available to you now in self-study research to see and focus on what kinds of questions are self-study scholars asking. There is an article that I posted from a master's student that I worked with at George Mason, an English teacher who was really struggling with creating a capstone research project for her class. And her assumption was if I could only get them to do something. And then she realized that by giving them a choice of what to ask and examining that, she uncovered her own assumptions of where and how a student might learn better. So again, it's personal situated, but it's not about you. Most definitively, and Mika and I joyously celebrate this as critical friends, self-study requires critical collaborative inquiry. It's not conducted alone, and actually those critical friends reciprocally mentor and are a validation group for each other, supportive, but also push each other to think and to question their data. So that critical collaborative inquiry doesn't have to be from people from your institution. Somebody had asked about that. And although I've worked with faculty, lots of faculty at George Mason, I have to say that I've had really wonderful experiences and shifting of my lens because I moved out of the university to also conduct research internationally. Third, as we said, it's for improved learning, and that learning is beyond the self. And you're having an opportunity to really be self-accountable, to create a sense of self-agency, to really think about what's teaching about or what is your practice about. And that is absolutely wonderful in a time of lots of top-down assessment. And sometimes I wonder what might schools look like if teachers were asked to do self-studies with critical friends in their schools. And I know some schools are doing that rather than only outside assessment. But those critical friends are essential to that, as are the fact that what you learn is beyond your personal learning. It is the so what. What's the impact? And a good self-study research, and one that gets published, returns to that question of what's the so what here? Who is learning and what's happening here? What was your purpose in this beyond yourself? And then fourth, transparent, systematic research process. Mika will talk about this more in detail later, but like any good high quality research, self-study research absolutely requires that you document and keep a very detailed record of what you collected, how you collected it, when you collected it, how you analyzed it. It's not like, oh, the themes emerge. No, we want to know how this study looked first from every detail that you can possibly offer so that we could understand it better. Sometimes people skim over that, but that's very, very important and often not addressed as much as we might think. Also, one of the other components that we've added here is that our role as researchers, and we know this, so many of you are new researchers and some of you are veterans, some of you are deans, but we know from our experience, regardless of our practitioner-based inquiries, that our work is to share it for peer review, to generate knowledge. And we do that with presentations and through publications, and that input is essential. So that's a little bit of the well, what is it? And then we saw that many of you wanted to ask and had questions related to how does it look? How do you go about it? So we created this slide for you. And first, just know that self-study is not something that's only done in one part of the world. It is global. It is interdisciplinary. It is transcontinental. You'll see the amount of work that self-study scholars in their institutions and practices around the world have contributed to the knowledge base of teaching and learning and education. It's really absolutely enlightening, the contributions that we've made since the early 1990s. So it's not limited to teacher educators or teachers, and it can be individual with critical friends. There can be collective self-study. And they can also be transdisciplinary, where you work across colleges and disciplines and with other practitioners. Why? That was another question some of you had. Why would you bother to do this? Well, and many of these reasons, of course, are integrated and intertwined, as is most research. For personal professional program renewal, for professional accountability and agency, a sense of agency, for promoting social justice in education. Mike has posted on the Dropbox a link that she and colleagues have created on diversity and inclusion. There are also some wonderful books in Brill and Sense series on diversity. And if you look at the questions that self-studies scholars have asked from the beginning, many of them are in an activist stance. Wow, now more important than ever in this era. And one that works towards reform, pushing the status quo. So that's been at the center of so much of our work. Reforming in the first person, the critical friends, and advancing the knowledge base. And last, how do self-study scholars go about studying their practice? The amazing thing about the self-study research methodology is that self-study scholars can adapt any method or methods that help them to best explore their inquiry. That really creates a very inventive and innovative platform that allows self-study scholars to not only use and adapt, but invent and add data sources that many scholars haven't had the opportunity to, as Kathleen and I like to say, play with. Methodologically inventive, absolutely. The self-study scholarship, SIG, has been an organic entity. We are constantly evolving. We are not stagnant in the work that we have done or consider how to, and we're always shifting and thinking about ways to be more collaboratively creative in co-creativity. And that's what is so interesting about self-study, is this collaborative and supportive community. So in that, again, in the Dropbox, you'll see some articles, and there's many others, the chapters. I mentioned the one with Samaris Roberts, the English teacher. Mike has posted one of Rad Stack, who used quantifiable data to look at his feedback to his students. He's a teacher educator. I also posted one, Samaris Frank and colleagues, on a collective self-study where we were looking at our clinicals and program coherence. Mike's done some wonderful work with her colleagues in Amsterdam on professional identities and teacher education. You'll see that there, as well as a blog of self-study in Europe and what it looks like and what's going on there. And then also Smith and colleagues have posted a very interesting chapter on using visually rich digital tools in a faculty self-study transdisciplinary community. And there's more. There's just a few that we grabbed to give you some examples. As we're going through this, and you've started to think about your question, I want you to think about why. Well, who are you? What's your, where are you situated? What might be the situation of your practice? And why would you conduct your self-study? There's more reasons than what we've posted here. And what of the methods that you know or might adapt have you considered? So we'll pause there for a minute, and then we'll move on to where I like to always go, and that's to you. And we've asked you to post and to consider what you wonder about most in your professional practice. When you are driving home from work, or when you're finished a day of teaching or work, wherever you are, what is the thing that you're constantly asking about? Gee, I wonder if I had a, or how did that work so well? What is that? And could you share some of those now? We'll take some time to collect some of those with each other. And again, throughout the webinar, please continue to do that. We're hoping to help to create a little network for you as well. Yes, I have the name of the self-study journal in the last slide and its link, Studying Teaching Education. Right. Mm. Right. And know that Laura and Mika and I are still learning. And sure.
Yeah,
Good questions, Mika, huh?
yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Wow. Yes, living out my practice. Mhm.
Yeah.
And you know, Mika, I'm really impressed. Look at all the eyes in here.
Yeah, it's
Really
great.
yeah. Right. The science teacher educator, that reminds me of Tom Russell's work where he returned as a teacher educator to a science classroom to
Yeah.
teach. That was a great study. Yeah. Oh, right. So should we move on and let these keep coming in? What do you
Yeah.
think? Yeah. Okay. And as Mika is going through these, please continue to send your inquiries and to think about the data and the method that you might use. Okay, Mika?
Yeah. Just reading all those interesting
Oh, I know
questions.
they're
Anastasia already mentioned it. One thing that is crucial when you are starting with your self-study is to invite some critical friends to work with you. And I always think I need my critical friends for two reasons. One reason is that I need support, but the other reason is that I need people who ask critical questions. Transparency is an important idea in the context of self-study research. And that means that you write down and you explain every step you take and every decision you make. That way, critical friends can follow your process and ask questions about why did you take that step and why did you take that decision. That way, we are working on self-study research projects that are trustworthy. In traditional research, we often talk about reliability, but reliability in the traditional sense is hard in self-study research, but we want to be trustworthy. So it's important to invite your critical friends, to work with your critical friends, and to take care that you document all the steps that you take and all the decisions you make. So please write a journal when you start with self-study research. We also added a practical point to this slide, and that is we advise you to set a deadline and a goal. It's so interesting to start with self-study research that you want to know and find out more and more, and you will meet things that are also interesting to study. But it's important to stay focused. So you can think about your new course. Maybe you like to use the results of your study to develop a new course, and that sets a deadline and a goal. You can also think about the conference presentation you would like to do next year. That will also set a goal. So think about your deadline and your goal, and try to get focused when you start your self-study research project. You can always do another self-study after you have finished your first one. Shall we go to the next slide, Anastasia?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I already talked about your self-study should be focused and manageable. We had quite a number of questions about the ethics of self-study research when you signed up. Were quite a number of people who asked about that. In general, I can say that the ethical rules for self-study research are the same as they are for other kinds of research. We all have to be very careful with confidence. We all have to collect informed consents from people who we interview or who we observe, or those kind of things. But there are two important sources, I think, that you can use to think more about ethical issues. The first one is, of course, the rules that your own institution have. All universities and colleges have a review commission or something like that. So look at it, look at the questions they ask you. And another, I think, very interesting source is the Code of Ethics that ARA has posted on its website. It goes through a lot of subjects, but you can look at the parts that are interesting and important to you. So that's also something that's nice to look at and also inspirational. Anastasia talked about thinking about your research question, and I see ideas coming along in the chats. It's very nice, and as Anastasia already mentioned, it's good to see that there are a lot of eyes in the questions and the ideas for your self-study project. So that's good. You have questions about what can I do in my practice, what can I do in my teaching, and so on and so on. Well, as soon as you have an idea about your self-study research, you have to start reading about the subject of your study. For example, if your research question is about reflection, it's just an example, then you need to find studies that are focusing on reflection, so that you can see what ideas there are, what theoretical approaches there are, what research there is, and you need that to underpin your concept of reflection, to define what in your study reflection means. And in that way, you also put your research in a context. And that's important when you return to the theoretical framework at the end of the study. As soon as you are going to ask what contribution offers my study to the general knowledge, then you can refer again to other publications about reflection. And maybe you will find something new, or you can make some findings more specific. Well, that's something to think about as soon as you're in the final stage of your self-study. I sometimes see some impatience when people are starting with a self-study, because it takes a lot of time to think about your research question and to read about it. But in general, when we are talking about research, just these first 2 stages take a third of the time of your research project, approximately, of course. So it's really helpful to think about your research question and about your theoretical framework. That doesn't mean that you don't have to return to this first part of your study. We all have to return to it and think about it again. It's always a kind of circle work, especially in self-study research. But it's good to take your time when you are starting your project. But we move on to the next slide. Data. There were also a number of questions about what kind of data can you use in self-study research. And again, the basic answer is all data that you would like to use, you can use them. We have put down some possible data sources on this slide, and I will not discuss them all, but just a few of them. I think interviews are always interesting with your students, with your colleagues, or if you're not in education, but also with your colleagues, or maybe with your patients, or other people that can tell you something about how you are doing your work, because that's where you are looking for. We see more and more art-based data in self-study research because it offers a lot of opportunities and new perspectives, new kind of data. Photos to look at your own history, for example, can be very helpful. I just had the opportunity to read a new PhD project from South Africa that used photos, and very interesting. You can use collages there. That's quite nice to show that there are different perspectives of different ideas about something. So there are a lot of possibilities to use art. I once asked people in the self-study group to send each other a picture of how they thought about self-study research, and that was very interesting. Some people posted a bridge because it helps me to connect theory and practice, and other people posted a mountain or a hill. Some were working hard to get to the top, and others were very happy to have reached the top and very proud of themselves. So you can use it in different ways. And then there are also narratives that you can use. And we also mentioned here the living educational theory. And I saw some people who are thinking about that. How can I show my ideas, my theoretical ideas in my teaching? That's not always easy. Do my students understand, and do I do it in the right way that they can understand what my intentions are? Living educational theory is introduced in self-study research by Jack Whitehead, and if you Google living educational theory, you'll find more about it. But it's really about I have ideas about teaching, but how can I put these in practice? Then we have collective sources. Of course, the work that you are doing with your critical friends is a good example. But also evaluations. I always think evaluations are a source that you already have. You already will receive, I suppose, all of us will receive evaluations of our teaching. That's an example of quantitative data. And yes, Anastasia already mentioned it, we can also use quantitative data in self-study research. We often use and collect qualitative data, but there's nothing wrong with also using quantitative data. And the example that Anastasia already mentioned of Jorien Radstake, I think it's a real nice self-study with a lot of counting in it. So have a look at it in the box. What I stated about collecting data, the same is the case about analyzing data. You can analyze data as you do in other forms of self-study research. But we want to be very careful that our research has quality. Again, you have to be transparent, and you have to be trustworthy in your self-study research. And we just have listed here 3 possibilities to do so. Member checks are a good example. If you have interviewed your students and you have analyzed the data, why not ask them if they recognize themselves in the analysis? We have validation. Your critical friend feedback is an important contribution to that. And I can also imagine, we did that in some self-study groups in the Netherlands, that if you are a little bit further in your research, you want to have a fresh person looking at it. So you can invite someone who does a kind of informal review and gives you new ideas. And of course, that's something we use in qualitative research, also other qualitative research, often triangulation, looking at something from different perspectives. And that can be of your sources, it can be of your data, it can be of your methods, that can also be of your analysis. Even it can be a triangulation of researchers. People can do the same work or can analyze it together or something like that. So these are, I think, some ideas, some practical ideas that hopefully you can use when you are working on your self-study project. Shall we move to the next slide? I think, oh, well, we are on schedule, I think. We start this slide with use your voice. When you have finished your self-study, you want to share it with others. And that's not only because you want to tell others what you have done and about your findings, but it's also something we as a community want to do. There are, let me have a look, 88 participants at this moment, and we know that there are more than 200 people who would like to receive the recording of this presentation. If all of us present and publish the ideas that we did find from our self-study research, we can develop a lot of new knowledge. And that's what we want to do. We want to share, to develop new knowledge. If you present or if you publish something, keep it simple, keep it clear and clear. Don't make it too complicated. And think about who you are talking to. It's different if you are presenting your results to your colleagues in your own institution, or when you are talking about on an international conference. I really remember the first time I had to talk in English. English-speaking people don't realize that, but on an international conference, and I really was very, very nervous. So you're not the only one who is nervous if that will be your first experience. But think about it. We try to speak English, and a lot of English-speaking people don't to speak another language. So be proud of yourself if you try something like that. One final remark about presenting and writing. It takes time. Many drafts, many peer reviews. We always only see the last and the final results and the final presentation when people do a presentation or the accepted version of a paper. Let me tell you something about this presentation. We didn't have a discussion about the content because we know each other and we have the same ideas. But still, we made a number of versions because then we wanted to tell something a little bit more this way or that way, or we wanted to add something. So you're looking now at version 10. So that's just an illustration that it takes time, many drafts, and then also you have to peer review that you have to go through if you want to publish something in an academic journal. There were some questions about the journals that you can use. Well, there are some ideas on the final slide. Anastasia will talk about that, but just 2 remarks. Of course, studying self-study, our studying teacher education, our own journal is a good idea, but more and more regular journals also accept self-study. I have been on the educational board of teaching and teacher education. And in the beginning, it was hard to publish a self-study there, but later on, it becomes more and more easy also because more and more reviewers knew something about self-study research. So there are a lot of possibilities. Over to you, Anastasia.
Okay, thank you, Mieke. Well, I see so many of you connecting with each other on the chat box, and that is wonderful. Mieke and I both know that our work has been enriched from the mentorship, the support, the collaboration that we've done within the self-study community. It is one of the most supportive SIGs of ARA, and if you're not a member yet, I highly encourage you to join. Your $10 will be very well spent. And we, thanks to the work of Eliza and others and Laura, we have ways to stay connected both with Facebook and Twitter. Our website link is there on this slide, as are the CASEL proceedings. And the CASEL proceedings, which take place in East Sussex, in England, every other year. Tom Russell and others have been absolutely working like constantly updating. We have all of the proceedings documented from 1996. If you want to see examples and also the way that self-study has changed over the years, please go and visit the CASEL conference history. Also, somebody asked about the link for studying teaching education. Mieke and I really encourage you to read widely, to see what good studies that get published look like, to see what kinds of questions they're asking, what kinds of data they're using, notice the emphasis in the theories and in their frames and in their analysis and on the impact. And last, also to mention that Springer has a series of teaching, self-study teaching, and there are books coming out right and left with wonderful books on methods and on disciplines in the Springer series. And the conference call for AERA, the American Educational Research Association conference, which will be in Florida maybe this year, coming up next year, we'll see. The call is due on July 22nd, and we really encourage you to submit a proposal to STEP and to get feedback and to attend that conference. It's a great way to get to know other people and to come to our session. I think we will stop here. Again, to thank you, and also as Mike found this wonderful picture of us at the castle banquet where we were celebrating so much. We do thank you for attending, but we want to ask if there's any other questions. We have our emails there. You're welcome to follow up with us, and we really do thank you. So let's see if there's Mike, did you want to say anything else that we might have missed here? Or?
Now, I really want to thank Laura, because I saw her solving a lot of technical problems when we were talking. So thank you, Laura. And Anastasia, it was a pleasure to work with you again. So please, everyone, work together. It's great to do self-study research with people you like.
Absolutely. Submitting a proposal to AERA, if you're in the middle of the research process, the reviewers like to see a finished product, and it is in the wording of where and how you might present the findings that you have right now, and then you can also continue with that later for a different study. But when you submit it, it should appear to be a finished process. Mm-hmm.
Anastasia, can you go back a slide real quick?
Sure.
There are two things I want to call folks' attention to. One, for those of you interested in submitting an AERA proposal, I believe it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, the STEP SIG did another webinar on how to write an AERA proposal. For those of you who want some further guidance around AERA proposal writing, that webinar is also on our SIG's website already. So you can go to the SIG's website and view that webinar for those of you wanting some last minute support in the writing of your proposal. And then later this month or early in August, we will do one more webinar in our summer series. And that webinar will focus on publishing. So once we all get our AERA proposals in, we will then shift focus to actually publishing our research and demystifying the publishing process. It's a great webinar opportunity for folks who are new to the writing and the publishing processes.
Thanks, Laura. Yes, yeah. Laura's going to share the webinar link on the STEP webpage, and that was one of the questions that just came up. Can you give us the link of the webinar? And then also the AERA proposal call is in the Dropbox. Oh, there it is as well. Okay, thank you.
Yep, the link I just shared in the chat window will take you to the general STEP website, and there's a drop-down menu that one of the options is webinars. And so you can go there and find it very easily.
Also, I see many of you are doctoral students, and we've posted last minute after we saw many questions related to that, just some examples of dissertations that have been done globally. So there's a file on dissertations SS for you. And also a really lovely piece by Pithouse Morgan and colleagues on methodological inventiveness. So you'll have that Dropbox link and you can cruise through it and use it as you like. And of course, there's so many other resources. It's really been our pleasure. Yeah. We've enjoyed it.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, we have really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you everyone for coming. We will stay on for a few minutes in case you do have questions. Feel free to put them into the chat window.
And again, Laura, we can't thank you enough.
Oh, you're welcome. I feel like I didn't do nearly as much as you think I did. And your expertise was wonderful.
Well, it was great. It was just so nice to see so many people interested and connecting with each other.
Yeah. People are leaving. You can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
The AERA paper deadline is July 22nd.
Yeah, it's fine to send an email.
Yes. And I can't emphasize enough how working collaboratively inside and outside your institution really will propel you professionally, will also give you writing and research opportunities, and widen your lens and your perspective on the inquiry that you're asking.
Yeah.
Some of you might be interested in creating a small group of faculty or other teachers to work with in a collective self-study about a question that you have.
There's a question about the dates for AERA, and I'm going to look. It looks like it's April 9 through 12 in 2021.
Oh, when is the,
Yeah, when is the actual conference? It's April 9 through 12.
Do you see the Dutch names? And my cousin's name is on the stage.
oh, no way. Isn't that beautiful? Thank you, Maggie.
One way or another.
It was meant to be.
A message.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Huh. That
Yeah.
is just something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Maybe Daisy, maybe Daisy.
yeah, Daisy. We went, Miki and I presented in South Africa. Thank you, Daisy. We love you too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 We're hoping. We're hoping.
Yeah. Keep safe, everyone. Yeah.
Keep safe. Be well.
Yeah.
Be the example, right? Your research is important.
Yeah.
Looks like people are starting to drop off and leave, so we will. Oh, there's Kathleen. Hi, Kathleen. Thank you for sponsoring this. And
Hi, Kathleen. Bye.
It's fun to see people. 88 names, there was way too many, right, to go through and really process who was here, but
oh,
you
yeah,
see them as they sign out.
Yeah.
it was just great.
Yeah.
At 11 o'clock, we'll end the webinar. I'll stop the recording and the last attendees will leave. I think the three of us should stay on for a minute just to
Okay.
chat, because knowing that there's another webinar coming up, I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your reflections.
Absolutely. And then you'll just stop recording.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Laura.
We'll give it one more minute in case people have
Yeah.
last minute questions.
Yeah.
Yes, we're still using it too, continually learning,
Yeah.
and it's a joy not to have it all figured out, right? No, who does?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Keep questioning yourself and your work. Yeah.
mm. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. That's
We'll
nice.
end on that comment. All right, that is the end of the webinar, and thank you all for joining us.
Yeah.